Hello, everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today, we are diving deep into the fascinating world of the most influential and controversial figure in psychology, Sigmund Freud. Freud is also known as the father of psychoanalysis. It focuses on exploring unconscious mind, early childhood experiences, and repressed emotion to understand current behavior, relationships, and emotional struggles. Here is a quick roadmap for today. We will be covering Freud's history, his model of the mind, and how he recognized anxiety. Then we'll break down defense mechanism, developmental stages, and the actual techniques used in therapy. Finally, we'll weigh the pros and cons of his legacy. Let's dive in. Early life. Sigmund Freud was born as Sigismund Shlomo Freud on May 6, 1856, in Freiburg, a small town in Moravia. His family moved to Vienna when he was 4, and that's where he spent most of his life. He actually intended to study law, but pivoted to medicine, focusing on neurology and physiology. He earned his medical degree in 1881. Path to psychoanalysis. The big shift came when he studied in Paris with Jean-Martin Charcot, who was using hypnosis to treat hysteria. This convinced Freud that physical symptoms could have psychological origin. He also collaborated with his friend Joseph Breuer on the famous case of Anna O. Breuer found her symptoms to be improved when she talked about past traumas under hypnosis. But Breuer cannot continue it because of countertransference, which we will discuss on the psychoanalysis part. Moving over to his publications, Freud was incredibly prolific, producing over 320 works. His most famous is the Interpretations of Dream from 1900s. He considers it as his most important work. In 1938, after the Nazis' annexation in Austria, Freud, who was a Jew, fled to London with his family. Sadly, he was a very heavy cigar smoker and cocaine addict too, which later on developed as a jaw cancer. After enduring over 30 surgeries, he passed away in London in 1939. His legacy is massive, establishing talk therapy as a valid form of medical treatment. Now, let's dive into the main concept of psychoanalysis. So, have you ever wondered how mind is actually organized? Freud used the famous iceberg metaphor to show the most of what drives us is hidden. The consciousness. This is the tip above the water. The thoughts, the feelings you're aware of right now. Next is the preconscious or the subconscious. This is the waterline. It is your mental waiting room, information you are not thinking about yet, but can pull up instantly, like your childhood best friend name or the phone number you have memorized. Next is the unconscious, which is the massive hidden bulk below the surface of the water. Freud believed this is where your deepest urges, secrets, and the painful traumas live, silently steering your lives without even you knowing it. So that's where things are stored and organized. But how does the mind operates? Enters the structural model. Freud said our personality has 3 components and they are constantly interacting and sometimes clashing. The id is the impulsive, instinctive, and completely unconscious part of our psyche. It's present from the birth and operates on the pleasure principle, demanding immediate gratification of our basic needs. Think of an hungry infant crying for the food. The ego develops from the id. It operates on the reality principle, striving to satisfy the id's desire in realistic and socially appropriate way. It can be considered as the mediator or the referee. And finally comes the superego. It is the moral component develops later on. It holds our internalized moral standards from our parents and society, our sense of right and wrong. Operates on the idealistic or the morality principle, pushing the ego to act perfectly. According to Freud, personality is a dynamic battling system When these three forces clash, the ego feels threatened, leading to anxiety. He classified three distinct types of anxiety based on which threat the ego is currently facing. First is the reality anxiety. This is the most basic form, rational fear in response to a real threat from the external world. Think seeing a poisonous snake. Next is the neurotic anxiety. This is the fear that its wild impulses will break through the ego's control and get into trouble. It's a free floating dread without an obvious reason. And the third is moral anxiety. This is the fear of the self or one's own conscience. The conflict is the ego versus the superego, and the feeling is guilt, shame, or being not good enough. This happens even for just the thought of doing something wrong. To protect itself from anxiety, the ego uses unconscious tool known as defense mechanisms. Let's break down the 9 key defense mechanisms shown here. The first is repression. This is the master defense. It's simply pushing painful thoughts so deep into the unconscious that you don't even remember them. Next is denial. This is refusing to accept reality because it's just too painful to face, like a smoker ignoring the health warning on the pack. Projection. Ever met someone who is clearly jealous but accuses you of being the jealous one? That's projection, attributing one's own unwanted feelings to others. Next is displacement. This is taking your emotion out on a safer target. If you had a bad day in college, you don't yell at your professor, you go home and yell at your younger siblings. The next defense mechanism is regression. This is like acting your age from 10 years ago. It is sliding back to childish behavior under stress, like an adult throwing a literal temper tantrum. Next is rationalization. This is giving logical excuse to wrong behavior. Instead of admitting you failed because you didn't study, you say, the test was unfairly hard anyways. Next is reaction formation. This is acting the exact opposite of how you truly feel. It's like being overly nice to someone you actually cannot stand. Next is sublimation. Freud considered this as the healthiest one. It's channeling bad impulses into positive outlets, like using aggressive energy to become a champion athlete. The last one is intellectualization. This is focusing on cold, hard facts and logic to avoid feelings of actual pain of an emotional situation. Now, we are getting into one of the Freud's most controversial theories, the psychosexual stages of development. Freud believed that as we grow, our libido, the life energy, focuses on different parts of our body called the erogenous zone. If a child has a traumatic experience or gets too much or too little satisfaction in a stage, they develop a fixation, which shapes their adult personality. Let's walk through the 5 stages. The first stage is the oral stage, starts from the birth till 18 months. In this stage, the erogenous zone is the mouth. The conflict at this stage is weaning off the mother's breast. If fixated, a person might become oral passive, who is trusting and gullible, or oral aggressive, who uses biting sarcasm or being overly argumentative. The second stage is the anal stage, which starts from 18 months to 3 years. The erogenous zone at this stage is at anus. The conflict at this stage is toilet training, the first time a child must exert self-control. This led to a famous term, anal retentive, being perfectionist, orderly, or stingy, versus anal expulsive, being messy, destructive, or cruel. The third stage is the phallic stage. It starts from 3 years till 6 years. In this stage, the erogenous zone is the genitals. This is where the Oedipus or Electra complex happens. A child's unconscious attraction to the opposite sex parent and rivalry with the same sex parent. For adult personality, success here means identifying with the same sex parent. Failure can lead to vanity, overambition, or sexual anxiety. The fourth stage is the latency stage, which starts in 6 years till 12 years. Sexual energies is repressed or hidden. Children focus on school, hobbies, and social skills. Freud thought failure here led to lack of social confidence or a failure to launch later in life. The fifth and the last stage is the genital stage. It starts from 12 years. Focus at this stage is mature sexual interest. The goal is to find balance between self pleasure and the needs of a partner. Freud called this an ideal adult, someone who can successfully love others and contribute to society. This all comes together in psychoanalysis, the therapeutic approach Freud pioneered. The goal is to uncover unconscious conflicts. A core technique is free association. The patient lies on the couch and is asked to abandon all filters or logic. They say every thoughts, images, or feelings that enters their mind, no matter how embarrassing they are. Freud believed that if you talk long enough, your inner guards, the ego, gets tired and the hidden truth, the id, slips out through unconscious associations. Dream analysis. Freud also called dream the royal road to the unconscious. Dream analysis explores two parts of every dream. First is manifest content, the literal story of the dream, and the latent content, the hidden symbolic meaning behind the dream. The goal is to decode these symbols to understand the unconscious wishes causing anxiety. Then there is analysis of resistance. Resistance is anything the patient does to block the progress of the therapy. It is a sign that the therapist is getting too close to the painful truth. Signs of resistance include showing up late, suddenly forgetting a key detail, or using humor to deflect a serious question. The therapist's job is to point this out gently and work through it. Perhaps the most important part of the therapy is transference, which Freud called the heart of the cure. This is when the patient transfers old feeling for someone else onto the therapist. For example, if a patient had a cold, distant father, they might start feeling that the therapist is being cold and distant, even if the therapist is actually very kind. This is useful because it lets the patient finally heal that original childhood wound by reliving it with a safe and aware professional. And sometimes here, countertransference also can happen. Countertransference is when the therapist reacts emotionally to the patient, which is stemming from the therapist's own unconscious needs, personal history, or triggers. And therefore, Joseph Brewer cannot continue the session with Anna. Finally, after gathering all data from dreams, free association, and transference, the therapist offers an interpretation. It must be done carefully. If the therapist gives the answer too soon, the patient will resist. They must be ready to hear the truth. The goal is insight. Once the patient truly sees the source of their problem, the symptoms like phobia or anxiety often begins to finish. Freud's idea have major strengths, but also significant criticism. Strengths: he highlighted the immense importance of childhood experiences. He recognized the influence of unconscious bias long before modern psychology proved it. And crucially, he pioneered talk therapy as a valid form of medical treatment. Criticisms: his theories often lack empirical testing or falsifiability. They are difficult to prove wrong. Many critics argued there is a massive overemphasis on sexuality as a primary driver. And finally, his original case studies were historically unrepresentative. Despite this, Freud's impact is undeniable, changing how we think about the hidden depth of the human mind. And that's an in-depth explanation from my end on Sigmund Freud and psychoanalysis. I hope this gave you a solid overview. Let me know in the comments below. Which of these concepts do you find most fascinating or controversial? Don't forget to like or subscribe for more in-depth psychological content. See you next time.